terminar esta sesión de hoy, de apertura, con una mesa económica, una mesa en la que van a formar parte pues, líderes políticas y económicas que saben mejor que nadie cuál es la actual coyuntura y si es buena esa coyuntura para la igualdad o cómo hacer que sea posible. Las lideresas que van a debatir a continuación tienen un considerable poder para ello. Así que les voy a ir pidiendo que suban. Por cierto, tenemos a la vicepresidenta primera del Gobierno, Nadia Calviño. Bienvenida, le pido que suba. Y por cierto, hoy, para hacerse la foto no ha tenido ningún problema, ¿verdad que no? Hoy había muchas mujeres en el photocall. Rebeca Grynspan, pueden aplaudir, pueden aplaudir. Rebeca Grynspan, secretaria general de la UNCTAD. Obiageli, Ezekwesili, experta en política económica, una mujer que ha ocupado distintas carteras en el Gobierno de su país. Bienvenida también. Y Ana Botín, presidenta del Banco Santander, que va a ser quien modere este magnífico plantel, así que vayan tomando asiento, bienvenida. Les dejo en manos de la señora Botín, así que yo ya me despido, un placer haberlas acompañado, esperemos que estas ideas sean inspiradoras y que sean el fruto de otras muchas y que se pongan en práctica. Muy buenas tardes.
Bueno, buenas tardes y muchas gracias, presidenta. María Teresa, muchas gracias por invitarme a moderar este panel. Me encanta por una vez ser yo la que hago las preguntas y tengo aquí un panel de lujo para todos los temas que queremos cubrir. Si no les importa ahora, como la señora ministra no entiende español, vamos a hablar en inglés. Ya he visto que aquí se hablan muchos idiomas. Madam Minister, given that I'm told your Spanish is getting better, but not quite yet there. If you agree, we'll do this in English.
That would be fantastic.
I think that's the correct thing to do, right? So you may take off your earphones.
It was awkward.
I don't know how to do a panel where they have to translate, because we have to make this fun and interactive, right?
I know. Thank you. She's so gracious. Thank you.
Good. I asked Vice President of the government and also Rebecca, and they agree we do this in English. So, I don't think our panelists need a lot of introduction. Vice President of the Spanish government, Nadia Calviño. I want to say that she's also the chair of the IMF's Monetary and Financial Committee. Vice President from Costa Rica, who has also been the secretary of SEGIB, and is now the secretary of UNCTAD in the United Nations, Rebecca. And of course, Nigeria's Minister of Mines and Education, and she has allowed me to call her Obi. Welcome. Fama.
Yes.
Okay. And Vice President for Africa, the World Bank, and also founder of Transparency International and Bring Back Our Girls. Amazing work you've done for years. Congratulations from all of us. So we are here to cover a series of topics on how we can together help better growth and more inclusive growth, and especially a growth that reaches everybody, including girls and women. I want to say, first of all, that it's an honor to be here because actually not 10 years ago, 17 years ago, back in 2005, I got a call from a vice president of the Spanish government, then María Teresa, 2005, and she said, Ana, I want to bring a group of diverse women from politics, from business, from media, from academia, to a meeting we're going to have in Maputo. And so she took us all to Mozambique. We spent a few days there. And I said, look, I don't think I can help you much on political leadership, but maybe we can help from the side of business. And the inspiration of María Teresa, I was then running Banesto, we started an initiative, a non-profit, called Sustainable Tourism in Africa. Mm-hmm. And for actually 7-8 years, we were able to cover 14 African countries where we had volunteers from Banesto travel in their own time to help out entrepreneurs. Again, by the end of the program, we had covered 14 countries, helping them improve their business with a banking experience. We paid for the holiday, which was actually a work holiday, and helping. And it helped to create more than 8,000 jobs. Wow. Over this time, and also sharing the Spanish know-how in tourism. Mm-hmm. So I'm very happy to say that this program has now been reinstated. It's called Best Africa, and we are now in 4 countries again helping with this initiative. So again, this is thanks to you, Maria Teresa. You were the inspiration, and I'm very happy that we were able to follow up on that. So if you agree, I will start with the Vice President, with Nadia. Of course, you can chip in. Let's try to make this not very formal.
Yes.
So, you know, I always say the difficult thing, and you've been living in a very interesting time as Vice President. You have had 2 black swan events. First, the COVID, once in 100 years. Now the war in Europe, and I want to say again that, you know, all our feelings are with the people fighting the war and all the refugees. And so I always say the urgent and the important. In your job, those are 2 things you have to constantly take care of. There's very important things that are going to change in the next 10 years, but also the urgent. So thinking about these 2 concepts, and again, what we are seeing now as a consequence of COVID and now the war is a lot of shortages, amongst others, in food. So what are the ideas, or what do you think we should be trying to do to help countries that are going to be more affected by this crisis than others in terms of the food shortages? What are the urgent, in this case, measures or ideas that you have on that?
Well, thanks very much for the invitation. Congratulations for this amazing event. I am still under the shock of Barbara Hendrick's extraordinary performance here. It has been not only beautiful, but also very inspiring. And as she was speaking, I was precisely thinking that for the past 2 years in particular, we've been forced to, or confronted with 2 events which are posing unprecedented challenges. First COVID, then this war, both with a global footprint, a global implication, and both events for which we did not have a roadmap. We have had to put up measures, luckily in a coordinated manner throughout the world, but we didn't have a roadmap. But I think that probably when you don't have a roadmap, the most useful thing you can have is a compass. And we actually have been acting with a very clear compass, which has been one of solidarity, unity, thinking about the weaker parts of our society and protecting the most vulnerable. And I think this compass has been essential for not losing track of the mid-term and long-term challenges while responding to the short-term requests or needs. And in this regard, I am quite proud to say and to think that Spain has been a country, for example, quite forthcoming in terms of welcoming refugees. Now it's Ukraine. We're going to welcome around 140,000 persons. We have a very large community in Spain, and we have been a country that has been very efficient in setting up receiving slots. We have also been a country protecting the most vulnerable parts of our society and supporting vaccination throughout the world. We're amongst the 5 top donors of vaccines throughout the world. And likewise, right now, as we are confronted in our countries with the challenge of inflation, I keep reminding everybody that for us, the challenge is inflation, but in many countries, the challenge is food security. And we need to also step up to that challenge and support most vulnerable countries throughout the world in supplying and trying to provide and ensure the food which is so necessary for their populations and so important if we all want to build, together a better world. So from this point of view, any discussion at the European or at the global level has to deal with food security, because we are all on the same boat and we need to help each other. Let me close on this.
Thank you, Nadia. So let me just go to Rebecca then also. And looking now a bit more ahead to the medium and long term, and again, some of the numbers and the progress that Africa has made over the last few years, and maybe Madam Minister, Obi, you can comment on that also later. There's a large and growing population. There's more and more people living in cities. The middle classes are getting bigger, and so that is all good news. Are there any experiences, and we also have women from Latin America here, what would you say could be ways of things that you have seen in your career, doesn't matter where in the world actually, but what are the, the structural changes, or what are the 3 things that you think, from your experience, we should be focusing on? How can we both help from Europe, from Spain, and also the things that should be changing next? What should be the priorities in terms of these more structural changes needed? And I'd love to get your views on that also, Obi.
Thank you, Ana. If you allow me first to really thank Maria Teresa for all the work that she has done, and for bringing the South Atlantic together, yes? So, the existence of the Atlantic will have to bridge between the North and the South, yes? And here there is a bridge between the women of the South with the women of the North to change the world. So that's the way to do it. So thank you so much. And I really want to I really want also to say hello to another Vice President of Costa Rica that is here with us, Epsi Campbell. So you have 2 ex-Vice Presidents with us. So thank you. And let me just say to Nadia that really Spain has been an example of solidarity. In the cooperation with the vaccines, was one of the first voices to really come to agree on a waiver on intellectual property, to come with the vaccines. All those things are so important. So really thank you very much. And as a former Ibero-American Secretary General, I really know firsthand all the effort that Spain has done. And let me say that Nadia has done in the IMF to put together the resilient and sustainability trust fund that is really a breakthrough, for the IMF. So really thank you very much, because Spain, through Nadia, has played really a very important leadership role. And can I follow your question together with Nadia's answer? Is that okay?
You can do whatever you would like.
Because in my present role,
you're free.
In my present role, I am, coordinating the effort of the UN with respect to the impact of the war of Ukraine in the developing world. Yes, and we have been working on the food stream, on the energy stream, and on the financial stream. Because what is happening is that the war in Ukraine, together with the effects and the impacts of COVID-19, as Nadia said, and also climate change. Let's not forget that, the Horn of Africa is really suffering a terrible drought that is putting, food security on the brink, yes? And that we have floods in South Africa, and that the effects of climate change is already affecting millions of people in the world. And that connects to Barbara Hendricks, talk to us. That was, as you said, so inspiring and so powerful, because we are having climate change refugees around the world, people that cannot, continue with their livelihoods because of climate change. And this, together with the war in Ukraine, is really creating the perfect storm. The perfect storm. And Africa will be badly hit, yes, because of this perfect storm. Not only Africa, Latin America too, Central America, the Caribbean, the small island developing states, they will suffer tremendously from this increase in prices of food, prices of energy, and tightening financial conditions. And according to our studies, more than 100 countries will be severely affected by one of these streams. Be food, be finance, be energy. And we know that the crisis will enter by any of the windows of these dimensions, yes? You can have a food crisis because of an energy crisis. You can have an energy crisis because of a financial crisis. And they are interacting and creating like this retrofitting, cycle of crisis towards the world. So I just want to ask all of you to raise the voice, to raise the visibility of this crisis that will affect, according to us, 1.7 billion people around the world. And we need to mobilize international, international action, coordinated action. And it's true what Nadia said, yes, that the financial architecture that we created so many years ago is not fit for purpose for a global crisis. We created an architecture that will go country by country, yes? When a country will have a problem, we will come in to not allow that country to fail, yes? But this is a global crisis. Climate change, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine are global. It's a global crisis. It doesn't stem from a bad behavior of any country. Yes? It's not a crisis that is affecting these billions of people because somebody did something, one person did something wrong, or one government did something wrong. So what are the instruments that we have really to confront this challenge? And we need to mobilize the international financial institutions and the governments in those boards, and we need to mobilize governments to really create the necessary policies to cushion the blow, to avoid a domino effect in all our countries. And we still have time to do that. Because, the first thing that happens when you have a cost of living crisis, that is what we are going through, yes, is that you use your savings. And the second thing you do is that you go to a family. And the third thing you do is that you go to a friend. But after that, there is no one to go to. And so it dries up very quickly for most of the households. And women and girls will pay a high price. We already know that when you have to take the decision between eating 3 times a day or the other needs of the family, the one that stops eating first is women and mothers. Yes. And so we need to act very quickly, and we need the voice of all the leaders and civil society to really raise to the political level the crisis that we are living in, because this is bad for many people in the world. This is an inequality crisis. This is a distributional crisis, because it's not that food is not available, it's that it's badly distributed. Yes? And so we need to get the help to the families that really need it. And sorry, Ana, but this connects with you. Africa has immense potential, yes, immense potential, but we are going backwards because of the global crisis, because of the global impact that is having on our economies. All the efforts that we did for so many years, and Obi, you know very well the effort to combat poverty, to combat, inequalities, and we are going back 20 years because of things that we cannot control. So the only thing we can ask the world is to look at this with the solidarity and with the effort that we need to really, stand up to a crisis that can really set a very vicious circle for many households, family, women and girls in the world. So that's my ask. Thank you.
So, Obi, obviously you can tell us whatever you would like, but given that there is a lot of urgency in the issues of food and energy and of course the financial impacts, but you more than anybody know what it takes to empower women and to help women progress. And we all know that one of the basic things that at the end is important, but somehow doesn't reach mostly women and girls, is education. So again, of course, the urgent needs and food is absolutely and security, food, I mean, those are the basic things, but education is really what medium term gets us out of this, right? There's some others, but so how do you put this into this whole situation? So yes, we make progress, we can feed people and girls and women, but also not lose sight of the compass, as Nadia was saying, of what it is we need to achieve for sustainable growth. We need education to reach everybody at all levels, including girls.
Thank you so very much. And thank you, my dear friend, Maria Therese. It's amazing the convening power that you have to bring all of these amazing women out of various continents of the world together to celebrate this 10th year with you. Thank you. You keep doing great work. I applaud you. You know, it's amazing how often the world finds itself at a momentous season when we need to radically change the course of our history. And I think that many of the things, many of the global shocks that we have been experiencing are sent in some divine way to enable us to have a real conversation as the world. The truth is, the structure of the world has long been asking to be discussed, but we failed to discuss because the political leadership to enable such a conversation was lacking. So every time we see things like the global pandemic, or now the food crisis, and even the global state of monetary policies and how it's affecting inflation because of the huge stimulus packages that had to be put together to respond to the challenges of COVID, we find that it is super crisis because we fail to have the political leadership to demonstrate what is necessary. Hard choices, tough choices. A leadership that is not working on the basis of expedience, right? We love expedience because that way nobody has to upset anybody. We can just all continue to be nice and pretend that everything is fine, but everything isn't fine with our world. And so the critical short-term issue is actually to simply get the top advanced economies to understand that getting the macroeconomic stability back on a steady path is important for the poor. If you like the poor rural regions of the world, get the macroeconomic stability. Global growth has to resume. The fastest way to help the poor in poorer regions is for global growth to resume. The fastest way for global growth to resume is to achieve, again, macroeconomic stability, because it's a necessary, even if not a sufficient condition for economic growth. Before COVID, the continent was already estimated to be the place which, if we continued on the normal course of action, would be left with 95% of the world's poor people by 2030. That was already a terrible piece of data. Now, imagine what has happened where more than 50 million additional people have dropped into poverty because of COVID. So the urgency is in stopping the bleeding. We are bleeding, and we must arrest that first. So it means that for all the countries on the continent, 3 critical issues must happen. We must really embrace the idea of sound policies. For if the world is talking about the death, the food crisis, how do we turn it around into Africa's moment to jumpstart Africa's agricultural productivity? You know, it's one side of it is to say, this is food crisis, oh my God, oh my God. The other part of it could be, well, this could be a moment. And if it turned into a moment through the right kinds of policies around agriculture production and productivity, guess the majority that would benefit from higher productivity? The women. Why? Because Africa's subsistence agriculture has more than 60% of it by women. And so this thing that is definitely a problem can be turned around into an opportunity through sound policies. The second part of it is, of course, that you do need to think of the impact of vibrant institutions. Institutions that are anchored on the basic rule of law, because they provide an incentive environment for action. The kind of investment that needs to enter into the agriculture sector would require a certain level of predictability of action. And therefore, it's the rule of the game. The rules of the game were well known and predictable, can facilitate domestic and external investment into the continent. The third part of it is that the continent must invest. There are certain investments that are so absolutely crucial. So the investment in public goods. There are certain public goods which, when women don't have it, they can never escape poverty. We know that one major investment that would enable women escape poverty is the appropriate investment in human capital development. And that now takes us straight into your question. Human capital development is your longer-term, medium to longer-term strategy for enabling people become more productive, and through their productivity, they can themselves lift themselves out of poverty. The era of saying we want to lift people out of poverty, we have seen that it doesn't work. People are best given access to the opportunity of the kinds of services that enhance their productivity. When their productivity is enhanced, they earn more income. Now, for education specifically, we have seen that it is not about education being in trouble. It is that we haven't analytically realized that the foundational literacy, the foundational numeracy and literacy skills, that's the depth, that's the real core issue. If we addressed foundational literacy and numeracy, a lot of other investments that we do in education and we don't see the outcomes will be corrected. So for girls, we have found that more girls are actually not having the foundational literacy and numeracy. And when more girls are not achieving, by the way, the data on foundational literacy and numeracy is that 9 out of every 10 African children that are below the age of 10 are not achieving this proficiency level of their counterparts around the world. Now, that's a disaster. Why? Because foundational literacy and numeracy is a predictor of poverty. So think of it. All of these things are so, as you said, interconnected, interwoven. And we need to think in a very integrated way about the problem. So what is it that our gathering here has to do with all of this? Well, I kind of think that if we're going to challenge the status quo of the world, Europe and Africa needs to be acting together better. At the moment, we have a lot of, what do you call this thing? These diplomatic conversations. Everybody just being diplomatic, and it's not helped the two continents. I think that today's world, where we have the great power competition going on between America and China, thinking that only these two countries exist in our world, that is so wrong. It is time that Europe should rise up in leadership. Europe is missing in action. You need someone who is a friend that can tell you the truth. I have come to tell you that truth. Europe is missing in action. Europe is missing in action. Why? Because Europe feels intimidated by these two great powers that are totally irresponsible in the way that they have been conducting their power fight while the world is in trouble. So what should happen? Europe should be more strategic. Europe needs to be together with Africa. Europe needs to realize that the era when it talked about partnership with Africa from a humanitarian perspective is over. Africa is a business case, not a humanitarian case. Look at what you were saying about energy. Imagine, who could have imagined what would happen with Russia and how it is threatening Europe's energy security? And yet your proximate neighbor is Africa. But because you failed to look at Africa from the perspective you should, you now find yourselves in a situation where you have to make some tough decisions. And I hope you really do make that tough decision. You do make those tough decisions, because that's how the new structure of the global economy will begin to forge and frame itself. I thank you very much.
You convinced me. So
I just spoke my mind.
yes, no, that's the thing to do. So macro stability in the world, number one. Second, strong institutions. Third, invest in education. I mean, I cannot agree more with you. And again, what Maria Teresa, when she took us to Mozambique, was working on, and some of the programs of the foundation, actually, number one, there's not much we can do about. We don't rule the world, as you said. It's other regions. Strong institutions is one of the programs with the Yale program,
Yes.
which actually we're partners with. We're very proud. Strong institutions are built.
I'm one of those that did the Yale program.
So strong
there are many of us around here. Yale people. Yes.
Great.
Do you see that? It's
Well-
amazing.
Wow. So this is really important. Strong institutions are built by strong leaders, and this is really what this program tries to do. Education, of course, is the other one. But I love the idea, and one of the facts, and I think this is United Nations facts, that by the end of the century, we'll have 4 billion more people in the world. 3 billion will be in Africa.
Yep.
1 billion in Asia, and the Americas will stay the same. So just that basic fact, number of people, is a great business case, right? Now, of course,
Great business.
there's many other things we need to do. The second one is, of course, proximity. So, given you're not just vice president of the Spanish government, but also economy, head of the economy ministers, what is it, and by the way, you'll be glad to know that exports from Spain to Africa are larger than to Latin America. We always think that, we have more relationship. The fact is, African-Spanish relationships have been growing and growing, growing at around 20%. So the question would be, what more can we do, aside from the 3 big issues that Obi mentioned, which we all agree with, in terms of promoting that business relationship, not just between Europe, but specifically from Spain with Africa. And as you know, and you and I have discussed this many times, and it's not just in Africa, it's also in Spain, SMEs are the basic structure of the economy in both sides. And that is not easy, right? Because these are small companies on both sides. How can we help from government, from the private sector, working together to give a further, push to this relationship?
Well, before I get to this, let me say I very much agree with Obi's attitude. I think that when we are confronted with challenges, and I think this is quite feminine, this approach, which is when we're confronted with a challenge, I think there are 2 approaches here. One is to just whine and say, oh, this is terrible, terrible. And the other one is to say, okay, let's get ready and try to deal with it. And I very much agree with what you said also in terms of, I was thinking on these midterm objectives, because as far as Europe is concerned, this time the EU has not been missing in action when responding to the pandemic. I have to say that conversely to what happened in previous crises, this time around they did put in place a very solid recovery plan, investment plan in Europe, which Spain is one of the largest countries benefiting from. And our recovery plan is very much focusing on human capital, natural capital, technological capital, also social capital, these institutions, these social institutions you were referring to. So I think that this time around Europe is responding well, but you're right to say with an inward-looking approach. We need to now, look up and have a much more international, broader-based approach. Well, there are 2 things that we can do to try to support what is definitely a business case. I fully agree. One is to build stronger multilateral institutions. One is to work more on the multilateral level. So UNCTAD obviously is an institution at hand, the IMF.
I'm so sorry. How else would I tell you that the telephone is Africa's greatest revolution?
So, I mean, these multilateral institutions have to work better together. And we talk about this a lot. I've been calling for this, you know, in all international meetings. I think there should be a little less conversation, a little more action, in the sense of getting together, coordinating the actions of the African Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, as far as that is concerned, the IMF, the World Bank, also the European Investment Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Actually, Spain has been supporting very much the EBRD getting into Sub-Saharan Africa, precisely because the EBRD is a bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, is a bank which is focusing very much on private sector and very much supporting investment into private SMEs and large company projects. So we, for one, are a country that strongly supports multilateral institutions investing more in Africa and coordinating themselves more in Africa, because one of the difficulties is when each one tries to do their own project or their own approach. And I think that this kind of international coordination is key, and Spain will be supporting this. And the second, bilateral action, I hope that after the 2 years of the pandemic, which have really stopped all our bilateral traveling, we can resume our Africa plan, because we did identify at the beginning of the mandate that Africa was a top priority for us, going beyond the Mediterranean, which is really our closest neighbors. But it is true that due to the pandemic, we've had to surmount other challenges and we couldn't travel. But I think indeed that we should go back to our plan and try to foster cooperation between the private sector and public sectors with a view to making this business case a reality, which I am sure we can if we all work with the same kind of, you know, compass, with the same kind of midterm objective.
Thank you so much. So I'm trying to keep us here on time. I think we have another 5 or 6 minutes. Is that okay? So, Rebecca, I was saying, going back to this business, Africa is a business case, not a humanitarian case. I fully agree. So from your point of view, and I was looking at some numbers, that 75% of all foreign direct investment cross-border was going into developed countries, not developing. So how can we change that? How can we help get more investment into Africa?
Yeah,
or in general developing countries, but in this case Africa, which is what?
Yeah, that is a report that we do, the World Investment Report, where we put that number forward. And it has been worse even with the recovery of COVID, yes, because the recovery of the investment flows were recovered for the developed countries, they were never recovered for the developing countries. So there are several issues here. One is true that the macroeconomic stability and trust is a very important part of investment going to the developing countries, and in this case to Africa, yes? So in that sense, I completely agree with Nadia and with Obi. You know, you need a framework. You need basic rules for the investment to come to your country. But it's also true that you have to overcome two other bottlenecks. You know, one is projects to invest. You know, there is in general a problem of the pipeline of projects that are ready to be bankable and to attract also private investment. And many, important ideas have come forward, but not many of them get to the point of being financed. And that has been a weakness of our countries and also in Africa. But the third point that I want to make is that you need public and private investment. it's not really true that you can de-risk projects, only project by project. You were saying, Obi, we need public goods. Yes, there are public goods that you need to be financed by the public sector for the private sector to really come to your country to invest. So you need both. You need the partnership of public and private, but you need the investment of public, of public projects, the infrastructure problem, the education, the health. Those are all conditions that will have to be, undertaken by the governments, by the tough choices that we were talking about. And you need, and I'm sorry to say this so bluntly true, you need the international community, because we know that we don't have the public resources to make the investments that we need. So we need the multilateral development banks. And we need, the possibility of a complement to the savings of the developing countries for them to be able to do those investments. And that is lacking, because when you have such an uncertain world and such a risky world, because of the global impact of COVID, because of the war, investment fly to the secure places. And when you have a Federal Reserve that is raising interest rates, in the US, so, it's very difficult to compete. And so you will raise interest rates in your countries that will make your country more risky, and then you won't be able to attract the investment that you need to attract for the things that you need to do. So coordination, and Nadia was saying that, coordination at the international level is very important. It's not only national policies. National policies are essential, but we are in an asymmetric world, yes? So we need the coordination at the international level to be able to raise to the challenge that the uncertainty and the volatility that we are living today is making. And that's why most of the investment is going to the developed country, not because of profitability. The profitability in the developing countries continues to be much higher, but the risk and the perception of risk and uncertainty is making the money go to the developed world. Let me just, I know that we don't have time, but one number, let me give you one number, Ana, on what you said. Because of the packages that were put forward, in the COVID-19, in the developed world, because they were the ones that had the fiscal space to do that, there are $3.5 trillion that could be channeled for investment, yes, and sustainable investment, if we want to talk about that. If we really leverage that with private money, we can go to a firepower of $10 trillion to be invested, half of what we need for the Sustainable Development Goals, okay? It's huge. So there is an opportunity there. It's true, there is an opportunity, but we need, international coordination to really make it possible for the developing countries to attract those investments.
You want to say something?
That's where it's not international coordination we need.
We
need to dismantle existing structures.
But it's international.
Listen.
It's international too.
No, Rebecca.
Yes,
you see,
yes.
I think that our dear friend Maria Teresa invited us so that we can be candid, right? We're not here to do diplomacy.
So what international
we know
organizations
that
would you dismantle?
We know that the global systems ain't working. We know that.
But that's what I'm saying.
We know that the bureaucracy is completely paralyzing. And that instead of the fiercest sense of urgency to tackle global problems, we're wringing what is it, our hands or our fingers, and hoping that the problems will go away. No, they won't. The more that people drop into poverty in a world where we have seen that the capitalism has actually delivered, capitalism has delivered better progress than all other economic systems. So I am one of those that would defend what capitalism has done. But we know that capitalism is also broken. Because it is broken, and we're trapped in this situation where you are now having intergenerational, interlocking poverty, out of which people are not escaping, we can't do business as usual. To gather people together to talk about little on-the-edge reforms of existing systems that are not delivering results is a complete waste of time. It is time for us as the world to sit at the table and to rethink, redesign based on reimagining. What kind of world would we be living for the generation that we're handing over to? Is it a world that is messed up where global institutions aren't delivering and yet nobody is calling to accountability? No, I don't think that that's what we should be doing. I vote for us as women of the world. And, you know, well, that's why she gathered us. She wants us to talk to the global systems, right? We, as the women of the world, should be saying that we have heard enough of excuses why the SDGs are not being delivered within timeline. And so it is time for the political class around the world to know that they owe a duty to those who are excluded from the growth that the world has so far experienced. Accountability is what we're here for. So we must get to that.
I would agree with that. I said the system is not fit for purpose. But if it's not through dialogue and coordination, you won't make the change.
That sounds like what we always say in the
But how would you do it
dialogue and
otherwise?
coordination is a UN language.
But how will you do it? How will you do it?
How we will do it is
How
that
would you do it?
we would be analytical. We will do an analysis that tells us where the gaps.
But we have.
No,
yes, we have.
Rebecca,
it's not true that we haven't.
What we're doing is
have.
very good, right? This is how you solve problems. If we become diplomatic, we won't solve the problems.
I am not diplomatic. I'm saying, how do you do it?
So how we do it is this. We can see.
You need leadership. Yes, it's true.
Yes.
You need leadership. But you have to talk to somebody. You know, if you want leadership without talking to anybody,
Rebecca,
you know, it won't work.
We don't want the blah, 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 blah. We've been hearing it for too long.
That is,
it is
no,
time
but blah, blah, blah
to
is also
come
to say,
table.
let's change everything and have no path to do it.
No, come to the table. All parties to this unequal world where the World Trade Organization has been struggling to find those who cared about globalization, suddenly retreating into protectionism. Come on, Rebecca. Where we see... Well,
we have said that.
Rebecca, can I...
It's not that we don't say that.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
You know, where we see that institutions of finance and investment, what you're doing is... We had the COVID. It was done by a great power. It started in China. Africa paid the price for it. Africa had no hand in COVID. But who did it affect most? Economically, Africa. We entered into recession for the last, since 25 years ago. Then, before COVID, there was the global financial and economic crisis. Who started it? It started on the streets of London and New York. Africa had no hand in it. Who did it affect most? Africans. We're tired of this kind of, pleasant conversations. It is time to have tough conversations about the global economic system and how it makes it difficult for even countries who carry out the best of domestic policies to grow. We want growth as a continent. There are three things that would determine Africa's future: the young people, the women, and technology. These three things will happen. Nobody saw China coming 40 years ago. Nobody saw India coming 30 years ago. Nobody will see Africa coming in a few years' time, because the women of Africa will definitely work together to force the world to have the kind of conversation that it shies away from having. I'm sorry to spoil the party.
No.
You haven't spoiled the party.
Okay. No, that's...
You haven't. No.
So let me just finish by saying it's very important to speak up. I think everything all of you have said is in the same direction. I think the important thing is how we get there. And we need not just a vision, but also a plan, right? And so if we want to change, and you said you believe in capitalism. Capitalism works if it has two things. One is competition, and second, transparency. Without growth, Africa will not do well,
Yes.
Europe will not do well, the world will not do well.
Yes.
To get sustainable growth, we need growth. To get green growth, we need growth.
Yes.
To get Africa and all the countries in the world into a sustainable, as you said, macro situation, growth is super important. So again, to summarize, I think building institutions, building leaders that are going to change institutions, whether it's the global ones. I've said many times, I've said it publicly, and I repeat it, the world needs a new social contract. The rule of the we're in a digital economy where we've made rules for a non-digital economy. The taxes, the competition, everything is made for a world that is no longer here. And so I am fully agreement, whether that gets into international institutions, whether I would dismantle or not all international institutions, that we need to have a private conversation, okay? And the way we do that also, but I am 100% with you, I've said it many times, we cannot continue to manage the world in a non-digital age. Because otherwise, there are companies like my company who pay 35% effective tax rate.
Yes.
And there are many large companies in the world that are digital companies doing the same that pay much less than that. And by the way, it's legal.
I know.
It's legal.
I know.
And where is the value being created? It's being created with us, the consumers, and that's happening in many countries. So we do need a new social contract. That's how I call it. I think all of us here agree with that. I've had this conversation with Nadia.
Can I say a 2-minute thing?
Yes,
so
but just one minute.
1 minute.
1 minute.
One country that has always, and I was in the international financial system, one country that always understood how to align with Africa is Spain. Interestingly, Spain, for some reason, when I was at the bank, whenever it is an Africa issue, I was very sure where Spain would come out. So I am not surprised that its trade relation with Africa is even much more than its trade relation with Latin America. I'm not surprised by it at all. I think that what then needs to happen is that government to government, business to business, to clearly identify the barriers that stand in the way of the SMEs in Spain and the SMEs in Africa really moving further up the production chain. We have seen from what happened during COVID that having one factory of the world somewhere in China is a disservice to the whole world. So diversifying the sources of supply chains would mean that there is so much more partnership economically that Africa and Spain can do and move the rest of the European Union toward that process. So I do see a solution, Madam Vice President.
Okay. Well, let's
So thank you very much, and I'm sure Maria Teresa will follow up on that idea and to bring us even closer together. Again, going back to building institutions and getting to know each other better, I think that's really the path forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.